When playing a game most of the time, you have to ride a fine line between what is difficult and what is fun. This line is completely subjective. For example, take someone like Mandalore Gaming. He chooses to play games on their hardest difficulties because that's what he takes as fun. For me, I like my games on normal, because that's what I think is most fun most of the time. So what does this all have to do with Risk of Rain 2? Well, Risk of Rain was originally a platformer with roguelike elements, and Risk of Rain 2 keeps that spirit. Risk of Rain 2 is difficult and has a high skill floor as well as a high skill ceiling. The game is hard and can still kick your ass on the highest difficulty no matter how many hours you have. The enemies are ruthless in pursuing you. Attacks will knock off massive chunks of your HP, but that music, it keeps pushing you through to kick some fucking ass. Hopple Games was started by two University of Washington students, Paul Morris and Duncan Drummond, who had a simple idea that started out on scrap paper and transformed into a deeply layered, methodical game of luck and skill. Risk of Rain 2 keeps the spirit of Risk of Rain and displays quite a bit of diverse complexities in the ways in which you build your character and coordinate with your team. I played Risk of Rain 2 quite a bit, and from my almost 200 hours, I can say that is my favorite roguelite. Now there's quite a bit of bullshit when it comes to naming schemes, but the reason Risk of Rain 2 is a roguelite and not a roguelike is because we're able to keep progression throughout your runs, i.e. lunar tokens, other survivors, and now even different skills. The game is good, but if you haven't read the title, this is a review and not a critique. The very fine line that Joseph Anderson finds is that a review is reviewing the item as a product, but a critique is critiquing it as a piece of art. Essentially, the difference is one factor's price while the other disregards it. Since this is a review, I'll say that the game is great. The game is fantastic, and for being 1/3 of the price of a AAA game, it still brings the polish which would come from an actually competent developer. Since that's out of the way, I figured we should start with visuals.
Oh, that is beautiful!
From doing research, and by research I mean reading a forum on Steam, I can definitively say that it's cel-shaded. There's more gamer lingo in this paragraph, but if you want to read it, I'll link it in the description. Anyways, the game looks good and is very customizable. I personally run it on the lowest settings since it gives me better frames when stuff gets real busy. I would like to think my rig is pretty powerful, but it can still chug when I play this game. So I should bring up the fact that sometimes the game can look kind of bland, but that's sort of the point. Like I brought up in my Outer Worlds review, sometimes developers will make the background bland so that enemies and things you should be looking out for stick out. This can be seen in the blue boxes that hold all of the items and the brightly colored enemies. While some of the enemy design can be slightly generic, the art design for items and environments can be pretty inspired. I think the one that sticks out to me the most is Rex, which is an overgrown robot who looks weird in all the right ways. One of the best parts of this game is when stuff gets busy, and I mean busy, and that's when the art design really shows. While it's difficult to discern what is a lens flare and what is the enemy, the chaotic energy really brings out the best. But while so much stuff is happening, sometimes the game cracks. The game holds up pretty well and doesn't crash too often, but when it does, it's annoying to all hell. I've had 3 to 4 hour runs nuked into oblivion because the game crashes. Some days I can play for a 3-hour run and never crash, while other days a single 50-minute run will nuke itself. While I could blame this on the fact that it's an early access, I seem to be in somewhat of a minority, due to the fact most people can run this game fine. Since turning down my settings, it has gotten better, but not to a point I would say it is completely perfect. Though it's still more stable than a ton of games out today. One more section before gameplay. I don't imagine you're drooling at the mouth to hear me sing the praises of the music, and that's because I don't listen to the music.
Die, heretic!
I did listen to music when I started, but just like almost all video game soundtracks, it started to wane on my sanity. Okay, for example, you have Payday 2, which has a shit ton of music, which helps because you'll be listening to it a lot. Simon Viklund did a great job at making almost all the music sound great, and only after about 500 hours did I feel like the soundtrack was getting boring. And that was mainly due to the fact I kept listening to Evil Eye and Death Wish, but for Risk of Rain, you'll be playing in 1 to 2 hour bursts with the same 40 minutes of music looping, and while I do admit it's good, my wacky gamer brain only allows for loud noises to stimulate my dopamine receptors. To sum up, the music is good, but after 200 hours, I would rather listen to something else. This doesn't really subtract to the overall experience, but doesn't really add anything to it either. Ah yes, the big chunk of text I spent the entire quarantine typing. This section will be split into subsections because I guess it's easier to organize, but anyways. The gameplay is amazing. The gameplay is almost perfect, but I will get to that. The main loop of Risk of Rain is to kill enemies, get money, get items, start teleported boss fights, go to the next area ad nauseum. And Risk of Rain 2 does it almost perfect. With 9 survivors and 99 items, there are plenty of combinations to be made for the perfect build. Whether you want to be a fuel cell royal capacitor crowbar build, or stim ukulele gasoline, or guillotine crowbar glasses, or missile will-o-wisp stim, there are tons of combinations, and I'll go over the most popular ones in a bit, but there is so much customizability.
Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass!
Like I said, the loop is kill enemies, get money, buy items from the blue boxes, and yes, it is canon that these boxes cost money, and kill more enemies to start the teleporter event and kill the boss, rinse, repeat. This loop is extremely entertaining and is what keeps the game extremely fresh to me, mostly because you can build yourself to become the most overpowered being to ever exist, teleporting across the map in an instant and nuking mobs before they get out of the ground. But it's not easy being that cheesy.
No, a crayon.
Yes, another great transition. Definitely didn't just watch Family Guy Funny Moments number 17 and get a hint of inspiration. Honestly though, if you have to steal from Seth MacFarlane for your comedy bits, maybe it's time to stop. Okay, this is actually interesting because instead of having later stages become progressively harder, they do something really interesting and have difficulty set to a timer. Okay, here's what I mean. You have difficulty, then difficulty scaling. For your difficulty, there is Drizzle, Rainstorm, and Monsoon. Drizzle makes it really easy to snowball after 3 stages. Rainstorm is of course your normal difficulty, and Monsoon is a really difficult start, but Jesus, that score at the end really makes it worth it. Changing the difficulty to Drizzle gives you damage reduction and regeneration, but also a minus 50% to difficulty scaling. Monsoon takes away most of your health regen and boosts difficulty scaling. So like I said, there is difficulty scaling which is set to a timer. The longer you are in a game, the harder it gets. In order they go easy, normal, hard, very hard, insane, impossible, I see you, I'm coming for you, and ha 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 is endless and just continues to grow. These difficulties just make enemies stronger and will impact how many bosses spawn before you reach the teleporter event.
Purple guy!
There are 9 survivors, each with their own skill sets. All of them have 4 abilities: a primary, secondary, utility, and special. The primary is your auto attack, your secondary is unique, your utility is movement, and your special is usually the hardest hitting. It'd be too much of a hassle to talk about all 9 of the survivors and their swappable skills, but I'll sum up what they are good at. First, you have the Commando, which in my opinion is the second worst survivor, mostly because their base speed is slow, their auto attack barely does any damage, and their roll is next to worthless. I don't see many people using them, and that's for a reason. The Huntress is the best survivor. Her utility allows for short teleportation, which means enemies can't hit her, but probably the best part is that you don't have to aim with her. The game does it for you. Multi is the main tank of your group and is extremely fun to mess around with, but doesn't have the damage output you need to snowball effectively in Monsoon. The Engineer is probably the one to play if you just want to sit back. Since turns have the same items you do, building Bustling Fungus and Aegis makes you next to invincible. The Artificer just sucks, never use her. The Mercenary is the second best unit, and that's mainly just because, like the Huntress, they have many abilities that let them blink through existence while doing damage.
Wrecks, just like Acrid, are unique in the fact that they don't need many items to do well, though I would only recommend them for skilled players.
And finally the Loader, which has the most fun mobility tools, which I can't use for the life of me. Probably the most fun just to abuse physics.
The greater good is coming to you from my bolter, alien.
There are many builds for survivors, but I'll go over the most common build. Stim, Will-O-Wisp, and Ukulele. Stim for faster attacks, Will-O-Wisp for the explosive on death, and Ukulele for AoE chain. But the most fun build are tactical nukes, which are fuel cells for more equipment charges, Royal Capacitor for the nuke, and crowbars to one-hit enemies. Some others would be Tesla Coil and Focus Crystal so you can kill mobs that are close to you way faster, and Guillotine with Brain Stalks and Wake of Vultures so you can kill an elite, become the elite, and then kill more elites. There are tons of combos unique to certain survivors, like building Focus Crystals on melee units just to boost overall damage, or running Bustling Fungus and Heartlet Afterburner on an engineer so he becomes the ultimate healer. Here's extra stuff I couldn't fit anywhere else. Every few stages you will get portals. For the gold portal, you'll need to find a gold shrine and offer it a ton of money. For the blue portal, you need to find this weird rock and give it a lunar token. The celestial portal will only show up randomly and is where you are able to sacrifice yourself to an obelisk. The blue portal leads you to the bazaar where you can find lunar items, which are double-edged swords. They usually have an upside and a downside. There are also red items and green items here you can exchange. I should probably also say this is also where you get the Artificer. That's everything, so let's get into maybe what was the longest time sink in this review.
I'll show you who's boss in this gym.
Contrary to popular belief, Risk of Rain 2 has a story, and a good one at that. Where most people don't care about the logs or take a peek at them and see most of them are incomplete, I've done the inhuman task of reading all of my logs. No, I said all of my logs, because in my 200 hours, I've yet to collect every log. After reading my logs, I was writing down notes on them, and all I have to say is, Jesus Christ, this is a lot of reading, but it's not a bad read at all. Now, if I want to continue, I'm gonna have to put up a spoiler warning. I guess I'm gonna summarize and interpret the story now. All of my notes on the logs will be in a Google Doc linked in the description. Like I said, I don't have all the logs, but maybe you can help me fill in the blanks. I'm gonna leave the document uncommon, and if you feel like it, maybe add your interpretations of the item logs. Note that in this doc, it isn't the logs verbatim. It is my interpretation of the logs and notes on the logs after reading them. Near the end, I really started to get bored, so yeah. Now it's time for my summary of the Risk of Rain story so far. My personal interpretation is that our reality and the game's reality diverge in 2019. In Risk of Rain, 2019 holds the year of the bloodiest human conflict ever committed, which is confirmed in the Warhorn log. After that, not sure how long after that, humans became a spacefaring species colonizing our solar system. In the broad time of the 2050s, the Contact Light, a UESC ship, gets blown up in orbit in the middle of nowhere, not close to any trade route or close to any ports, which is told to us by the gasoline log. After the Contact Light is blown out of orbit, many of the UESC boxes come crashing down to a habitable planet, along with many survivors. There are many groups of survivors, but the ones I want to focus on the most are Marion and Weshin, who seem to have a link with Enkuhana. Enkuhana is some form of deity which influences people who use her dagger. This is seen when Weshin kills Marion. To explain, let's look at the entire history of what I like to call the Wetland Team. The Wetland Team consists of Marion, Weshin, Carney, Pugh, Hitchcock, Larson, Dillon, and Stevens. It is unknown to us how it happens, but Marion gets a hold of the ceremonial dagger, which we now know is linked to Enkuhana. After holding the dagger, Marion understands what it does and its purpose. After returning to the group, they are quickly swarmed by golems. Marion, who is known as the strongest of the group, pulls out the dagger and gives it to Weshin, asking Weshin to kill her. This is told in depth in the ceremonial log. In the Wetland Aspect log, it is shown that after killing Marion, Weshin seems to be influenced by Enkuhana. After this happens, she understands, but her teammate Pugh, who is called So Crazy, doesn't understand, and at risk of Pugh not understanding, Weshin kills Pugh as well. Sadly, this doesn't save all the members of Wetland Team, and Hitchcock dies. After getting away, Weshin, who is with another member, Carney, finds a log in a Contact Light chest, the blue boxes scattered everywhere. After reading it, Weshin understands even more, and understands how Marion got the dagger, and knew how it would work. Again, at risk of Carney not understanding, Weshin kills Carney. But it is said that Carney is so big, so instead Weshin hides Carney's body in the pit underneath the Wetland Aspect. After returning to the group, Weshin is now fully under the influence of Enkuhana.
and sacrifices the rest of her teammates, Larson, Dylan, and Stevens. That is currently the entire experience with Wetland Team and Weshin's story. But, like said previously, there's a lot that hasn't been written yet. Let's dive into a few other survivor stories. There's a sole survivor in the log of the abandoned aqueduct, a lone survivor with just a healing drone. After being driven down the pit by beetles, they break their leg and are healed by the drone. Over time, they are transformed into a beetle by the constant reuse of the sound effect cheeked, like the calls of beetles. A slightly more optimistic case, but not by much, can be seen in the Medbay team. This story is told in the medkit log and tells of a man in a blue combat helmet who seems to think survival is solely dependent on him. After conversing with a drone who repeats the same line about staying indoors and resting, the man takes a shotgun and leaves to complete a task that we honestly don't know about. The Queen's Gland log tells us of a group of survivors strong enough to take down a beetle queen and obtain the Queen's Gland and have a friendly beetle helping them out. Another group of optimistic survivors is told in the Bundle of Fireworks log. Just a couple stuck on a death planet, celebrating their anniversary with a bundle of fireworks. And finally, a log that made me audibly laugh for zero reason is the Sticky Bomb log. Essentially what happens is a person and a group of survivors finds a 3D printer of sticky bombs and uses all of their supplies to print sticky bombs because the planet is trying to kill them. Sadly, the happy logs are few and far between. Many of the logs tell depressing stories like the Little Disciple, which seems to be a person's descent into insanity, or the Soldier Syringe log, which seems to be of a survivor overdosing because fortune's a knockin'. The most informative log is also, in my opinion, the most depressing. The Gasoline log. The Gasoline log tells of two men sitting over a gasoline fire. They talk of rescue. While Man 1 is an optimist, Man 2 is a cynicist, grounding Man 1's expectations. Probably the saddest part of the log is at the end when they're about to eat some questionable food. It is unknown what the food actually is, but between Man 1 asking if it's poisonous and Man 2's unenthusiastic inability to vouch for the taste, we can assume that the two men are eating dead survivors. Now, throughout many of the logs, there are hints of things to be foretold in later logs. For example, we learn of the second expedition to the Contact Light. This is told in the Tougher Times log. A conversation between Wyatt and Malik explains the UESC hired people to hunt down the lost cargo of the Contact Light. It is presumed that all the item logs with shipping orders were on the Contact Light and are now lost to this alien planet. Now you might be wondering what the UESC is, and to that I don't have a direct answer. It just seems like another evil corporation looking towards profits over ethicality. A weird standout occurrence are the few logs of D. Furthen, who is a naturalist working in conjunction with UESC research and documentation of outer life. God, that's a fucking mouthful. D. Furthen records things about the endemic life on the new planet, but we only have 3 logs of Furthen's antics. D. Furthen isn't alone though, and has a friend in Tharson who keeps me safe. Tharson does seem more like a test subject, fighting beetle guards and living through jellyfish stings. Sadly, there are too few logs to really learn more about this duo, but we can tell by the tone of the logs and the fact that they are part of a specific UESC research and documentation team that this team comes post-Contact Light explosion. So the too long didn't give a shit version would be Ship Go Boom, Survivor Survive, We Open Blue Box.
Contrary to... Oh no, I already read that part. Fuck. The game is good. The game is great. The game is slightly unfinished. I think that's to be expected in a game with this many complexities, especially when it's not even out of early access. I guess the fastest way for me to sum up the way I feel about Risk of Rain 2 is to say that it's delightfully chaotic. Before I give my score, I want to reiterate what I said in the intro section of the video. This video is a review first and foremost, and because of that, I need to include the factor that it's only $20. I can honestly say it's one of the best games at that price point. Now, if I were to give it an actual score, I can't help but feel like a 9 out of 10 is sort of blown out of proportion, so I think I'll settle for an 8.5 out of 10. I know 8.5 seems low with the way I've been gushing about the game, but I can't help but feel like something is missing. I think that's all I have to say about the game.
Like you cut, G.
So you might have noticed throughout the review I didn't really bring up the new update stuff, which is about the new survivor, some of the new items which have some story stuff written into it, and the new area, along with the, I believe they're called artifacts, and that's mainly because I would have to throw it in gameplay, and gameplay was already kind of set in stone. So right now you might be noticing an audio difference, and that's because when all the audio was originally recorded in about mid-March, I was using a different microphone. Right now I'm using my headset because my old microphone is now broken and I need to get it replaced, which is sort of hell right now. Along with that, I have a broken hard drive, which is why this review took so long to make. It was originally supposed to come out in early to mid-April, but now it's going to be coming out about early to mid-May, so hopefully it's worth the time. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say, so you can listen to me delusional at about 6 a.m. when I originally recorded this.
Face up!
Jesus, this took way too long to make. I sort of took a hiatus from making reviews for the past few months, but I really feel like getting back into the swing of things. I really feel like IGN, half because these reviews are dog shit, but because I keep handing out these ridiculously high scores, sort of feel obligated to talk about how much of a bitch it was to collect all those logs. I feel like I'm doing a disservice by not getting all of them, but I'm pretty lazy. A few more things to say. Let's see. When I'm recording this voiceover, like at least this part of the voiceover, it's about 6 in the morning. So I'm a little delirious from sleep deprivation. But I hope you enjoyed the video. So I think I'll close this review out like all the others with some visually appealing B-roll.